Me sound like an expert, and what's awesome is the more I learn about emotions and ethics and AI and how it's being applied across the board, the more I realize I actually don't know anything. And I kind of love that. I kind of love that I don't know anything. So take this journey with me as I continue to learn. This talk I initially gave, or a version of it, 2 years ago, and I barely found anything online when I was looking up emotions, and it was really only about emotions. And then in the last 2 years, with the explosion of AI and like how we're seeing it sort of infiltrate everything that we're doing, there's a lot more information and a lot more stuff for us to parse. So I'm going to break it down the best I can. I have 18 minutes and 3 cups of coffee, so let's do this. Okay, so the one thing I discovered this time around is that we can't actually separate emotions from AI, right? These two things are really tied together. But I'm going to talk about AI for all of 5 minutes, and I'm really going to try and simplify it for everyone in the room because I know there's a lot to take in. So there are 2 camps, I think, if you really think about it. There's the Elon Musk camp, which is really about him saying that when it comes to AI, we are summoning a demon. And boy, does that sound really dark and actually kind of scary. But on the flip side, we have somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, who's a little bit different, who looks at it like, you know what, the people that do this and dream up these doomsday scenarios, they're just naysayers, and they're being super negative, and that's not who we are. And so I sat there for a while, and I'm like, okay, we've got, oh. Hello? Okay. So anyways, I'm double mic'd. Okay, how's that better? Yeah. Delightful. Okay, so these 2 guys, they kind of look the same. They are the same. They're both CEOs of tech companies. Who are we kidding? How is it that they're seeing things so differently in the AI world? So I'm going to show you how that's possible. Elon is thinking about the future. He's the one true futurist that we really have right now. So when he's talking about AI, he's talking about 5 to 10 years from now, right? And which makes sense. The guy's building rockets to Mars, so all of that makes sense for him. And so the forms of AI that he talks about are like super intelligence and general intelligence. And so what that means for people like us, let's put it in movie terms. It's Samantha from Her, or it's Hal from 2001. Like, these kinds of things that you experience are way smarter than us. And in some cases, they're as smart as us. So that's Elon's camp. Zuck is more of a nowist, which isn't a real word, I kind of made that up. But, because there isn't one. But for Zuckerberg, he's looking at narrow intelligence, which is where we are right now. And you guys are really familiar with that, whether you realize it or not. So the TurboTax software that you may have just used, that's AI. The Roomba that might be cleaning your room while you're sitting here, that's AI. So all of that stuff that's sort of falling into that umbrella is really just the stuff that we're dealing with every day to make our lives better. But it's informed by things that we do, right? So it's not better than us. It's actually kind of dumb, but it's learning. It's doing its best. And if there's 5 things you need to know, if you want to look wicked smart in the room, these are the 5 things you need to know. It's not new. AI's been around since, I don't know, almost 70 years now. So a decent amount of time. So even though it's been around 70 years, you're just seeing a lot more of it because press. That's really why, and a lot of companies are starting to invest in it. It's not a thing, so there's no such thing as an AI. This is actually a big umbrella of technology. A constellation of technologies is another way to look at it, so it's not a thing, right? Just like human intelligence isn't a thing, artificial intelligence isn't an actual thing. It's not neutral, so any biases that any of you guys have, whether conscious or unconscious, and we all have them, it will go into the algorithm that you are creating, and that's why diversity is so key for us. And then it's only as good as the data. So a lot like food, you put bad food in your body, you get a bad result. Guess what? You put bad data in there, you're going to get a bad result. And then finally, the one that I really want to focus on, which is that it acts humanly and rationally. So humanly and rationally, again, in like people terms, Kirk and Spock. Like, Kirk's the human kind of guy, and Spock is more rational. So we're going to focus on that because that's the one that really affects emotions. And what I want to do is give you an example of something that got released to the public just a few weeks ago by Google, just to give you an example of what happens when we create something that acts humanly and rationally. Hi, I'm here. Hi, I'm calling to book
haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like, what service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have it 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's your first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd.
So that really, really both impressed me and freaked me out. So I think it's actually wonderful that we're working towards things like this. And I think that a lot of good will come from it, and a lot of discussions are coming from it, which is precisely what we want to do, right? We need to keep talking about this kind of stuff. But what's happening with these companies that are really sort of leading the way for obvious reasons is that they are starting to invest heavily in emotion-focused startups, right? And there are a few out there, and they're making the acquisitions. And of course, we can only take a guess, like what they're being used for, obviously for assistance and Internet of Things and all that stuff. So it's pretty pervasive. And if AI is big business, and if we're talking about behaving humanly and rationally, guess what? Emotions actually is the new currency in all of this, and it's your emotions, and we all have them. Because as designers, we once used to focus on personal data, right? So like all the information that you have that goes out on the web, that you fill out your forms, that used to be how we base things. But it's actually giving away something far more valuable, and that is personality data. And personality data like that is worth a tremendous amount of money. And how we arrive at personality data is that we have emotions, and emotions in a certain context create expression. And then expressions in combination then create personality. And personality is actually what makes us human, right? So does that make sense? So you've got your emotions, and your emotions make up your expressions, and your expressions make up your personality. And your personality makes you human, and what a surprise, humans are a mess of emotions. So that was the AI part of the talk, and now I'm actually going to get to the emotion side of things, just so you can sort of understand where we're going with all of this and why it's so important. So when I gave this talk for the first time 2.5 years ago, there was virtually nothing, and I had to teach myself psychology in 2 hours on a Sunday. So of course I went to Google and did a search and tried to find a model of emotions to use, and I found that people were saying that there were 6 emotions and 9 emotions and all these emotions, and then I found this thing and I was like, hot dog, look at this, 32 emotions, I love it. So I'm going to be honest, I'm not a psych major, and I picked it because it was pretty. And I said, okay, this sounds pretty good. I think we can work with this model, but it's still not, it doesn't speak to me in the modern language. So I changed it and applied emojis to it, and now things start to make sense to me, right? Now I'm looking at this particular model and I'm thinking, okay, I understand how emotions are made, but what's really going on in this particular model? So what's happening is, at the very center of it, you get your super intense emotions, right? That's like the ecstasy that you might feel, and the emoji that you get there with a sort of open mouth, closed-eyed laughing. And as it moves out, things get much calmer, and maybe your emotions are a little more meh. And what we do is we call that progression. So like within each one, you're going from very intense emotions, and then you might actually dissipate, right? And it gets very sort of calm. And it bounces back and forth. But it also transitions. So you can also have emotions that go from one to the other. And you've seen it all the time, right? You get happy, you get sad. It happens. And if that's what's happening mentally for you, physically, you're actually feeling it in your bodies. And different emotions, we feel them differently. And if you're like me, you talk with your hands. So it's actually really hard that I have 2 things in my hands right now, because normally they'd be flailing. So we do actually feel it in our bodies. And then we have all the muscles in our faces, roughly 45 muscles, like expressing these particular things. And we have voice inflections, about roughly 400 voice inflections. So hold on, 45 facial movements, 400 voice inflections, 32 emotions. I'm flailing my arms. I might be throwing a chair if it's a bad day. And guess what? That's a tremendous amount of data, just about like me, just about one person. So let me give you an example of what happens when we look at something or someone. His name is Ralph. And let's take a look at Ralph, and let's look at sort of mapping his emotions. So that's 6 seconds of Ralph, right? And in 6 seconds, we managed to see 2 interactions, 10 emotions, 5 transitions, 4 progressions. That is 6 seconds of Ralph, and that is some deeply personal information that we have right there. So if that's, and he's just a cartoon character, so like we skipped frames, right, in order to like animate him. So now we need to look out for humans, and now we have to figure out what to do with all the human information that's coming in. So in the audience, are there designers in this audience? Okay, so y'all are pretty familiar with empathy. So empathy for us, designers, is that it's the driving force of a lot of our human-centric experiences. We pride ourselves on the ability to connect with people and to connect products with people and to connect people with people, and it's just all about connections, right? And really understanding where the users are. And how we do that is really by identifying the context that the user is in. So if you think about Ralph, he was outside with his 2 little interactions of raising a flag and lowering it on a mailbox. We understand the context of where that took place. Had he been standing in a kitchen with a slice of cheese doing something similar, like that's a very different context, but the interactions may have been the same. It may have been an up and down thing, but the way we would analyze that would be very different. So context, what it does is that it helps us understand all the emotions that they're feeling. It allows us to listen to what they're saying, and then it also allows us to observe the behavior. And all of these things together help us identify and gather the information about the user. So that personal information and that personality information. And because that's so deeply personal, this is where ethics comes in. Because ethics for us, which is sort of in the background, and you kind of knew like, don't screw anybody over, designer. And it was something that we were okay with. Now that we're getting so deeply personal with all this information, ethics really does have to come into play here. And we have to figure out what the models are going to be for dealing with ethics, because I don't think we know that. The good news is, ethics isn't new. So a lot of people, a lot of groups have been dealing with it before. So if you think about the Hippocratic Oath, that is an ethics-based oath that takes place, right? So I, as a practitioner, would graduate from medical school, and then I would take this oath, essentially saying that I would do no harm to a particular patient. And in this case, I actually pulled out this quote because in '64, Tufts University rewrote the Hippocratic Oath, which I thought was great. So they modernized it, right? Which tells us that all the models that exist from before can be adapted to something that's new today. So they decided to adapt it, and my favorite line from this is, I will remember that I remain a member of society with special obligations to all my fellow human beings. That doesn't sound terrible. That actually sounds really nice if we're taking care of people. And again, for those of us that are user-centric, that's precisely what we should be doing. So if that's happening on the professional side, on the discipline side, and what's happening on the human side? Well, Eleanor Roosevelt sat down with a few people when the United Nations was formed in 1948 and put together the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And this is an amazing document that's surprisingly easy to read. So I highly recommend you guys flip through it. And that was in 1948. And I pulled out this line because I thought this was remarkable, which is, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence. So just think about that line for 1 second. Sure does sound like today, right? So we talked about Google Home or Alexa being in your home. We obviously know what correspondence is. So clearly there's a way that human rights in some way can be established and extended into the digital world of what we're doing. And it's fast becoming a movement. There are other groups that are focused on this as well. So we have groups like the Partnership on AI. So this is a consortium of folks from all the different tech companies that are getting together to try and figure out exactly what the protocols should be for using AI and how we educate people. The World Economic Forum is actually working on getting ethics into schools and like what does the curriculum for ethics do, and that is incredible because if we can get the young ones to understand how to do it, they will keep the movement going. That's precisely what we want. The IEEE organization, they're trying to create frameworks in terms of like how we create ethically designed AI systems, And then California, the great state of California, my favorite state of all, this state is currently working on creating their own Bill of Rights, which I think is pretty incredible, and I'm really happy it's coming out of the state because obviously the technology companies are sitting here, so it's sending a pretty good message. So that's a lot of information, and you're probably thinking, great, so what? Now what about me? So let's say you want to get involved in some way, and there are ways for you to get involved because this thing is so very new that we don't have a lot of experts. Right? So I'm learning, and you're learning, right? And hopefully you'll learn a little bit more, and if that little spark comes up and you feel interested, you'll get in touch with one of these guys. Because the good news is that you actually start understanding people's emotions at the age of 51, which is remarkable. So guess what? The majority of you have not aged out of this particular thing, right? Because there is a level of maturity that takes place here in understanding and creating these like empathetic experiences and understanding how to deal with people, and that just comes with age, frankly. This slide's not centered. There's a few other things you need to do. One is to turn some common constructs on their head, and here's what I mean by that. So right now, a lot of times we focus on things like copy, and we focus on hierarchy, and we focus on users, and none of that is wrong. But I think for the future, we need to start focusing on things like voice, on color profiles, on cadence, on humans instead. So the shift is relatively minor. It's really more in the way you approach things than anything else. But in doing so, it'll help you prepare a little bit more for what's to come. The second thing, and this is a little bit harder for those of you that live here in the Valley, it's to step outside the bubble and change who you hire. And I'll show you why. Because that's what technology looks like right now. It's a bunch of the same. And what makes me really sad about this is that that's not just tech companies. There are academic institutions in there as well. And everybody kind of looks the same to me. And I'm not really keen on that because when you have people that act, look, and do the same, you are going to get that bad piece of data and all those biases in there, and you will get a really poor quality out of it. So what I wanted to show here, though, are these two people, which I find fascinating. The woman on the left is the CEO of a company called Affectiva. Now, Affectiva is leading the way in all sorts of emotions research, and what I love about her is that she's publicly said she doesn't want to sell to a large company. So this is like music to my ear, because hopefully there'll be some fairness and some openness in this, and she's willing to share her information. She's Muslim, she's Egyptian, and she's the CEO of Affectiva. The woman on the right used to be a man, and when he was the CEO of Sirius. That person since made the transition and has now created a robotics company and is working on downloading people's personalities into robots. Its name is Bina48. And if you don't know Bina48, I'm guessing most of you don't know Bina48, I highly recommend you check out the videos. Try not to get too freaked out, but it's super interesting to sort of watch this person take this information and download it into that particular robot. It's pretty rad. There's some other stuff you can do, which is there's a lot of focus on STEM and sort of hiring in the tech community, which is really cool. I would argue that we actually need to hire a different kind of person out there. I think we need to hire empaths. I think we need to hire philosophers. I think we need to hire ethicists. I think we need to hold on to the arts that currently exist right there and keep pushing that thing forward. Tech is still very important for everything we do. Obviously, the products wouldn't exist without that. But there's a level of care and approach that's a little bit different, and some highly empathetic people can certainly help us with that. There may be some new titles that we would have laughed about, like back in 2001 when the bottom fell out. Some of those titles that might be coming out could be Chief Emotions Officer or Empath Officer or Ethics Officer. Like, these are really going to be super important roles. The gentleman that's on the left there is the Director of Ethics at MIT Media Lab. So that should give you a pretty good idea. They've hired a Buddhist monk. So this isn't like sort of a big flashy show thing. This is for real, and people are taking this very seriously. And the fact that MIT Media Lab is saying, look, we understand what's happening, we're going to hire this person to help us understand it. We take our learnings from academic institutions, and we should be following suit and really thinking about it that way. If you can't afford to hire a full-time ethicist, hire a consultant. Have them come in and just teach you guys on how to do different approaches, give you a real one. Then, my favorite, we have to point that moral compass in the right direction. All of you guys, all of us, have a moral compass. And we all know what's right and what's wrong. And so vital now that we really listen to those inside voices and we do exactly what the right thing to do is. Because Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft, and I would argue the grown-up of all of them, said that it's not really a question of what computers can do, but really what we should do. And I think that's really important. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And the reason why we say something like that is because a couple of examples showed up recently that really scared me. There was one example that came from the Stanford students where they trained an algorithm to identify gay people with an 81% accuracy rate. Maybe that's fine for the San Francisco community. It's not great for the world. There's a lot of countries out there where it's still very, very illegal. And this is very scary stuff. Also, I don't even know what any of that stuff was based on. They claimed they were doing it because they wanted to sound the alarm. But one of the guys that actually invented it is now getting death threats, so much for that alarm. The other thing that came out recently, I think last year, was a fake Obama video. So they took one sentence from an Obama speech and they created an entire video around it. So I actually have that here and I want you guys to take a look at it because I'd love to just sort of get a feel for what y'all think of this.
Given this audio as input,
it's been less than a week since the deadliest mass shooting in American history.
our method produces the following output.
It's been less than a week since the deadliest mass shooting in American history. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando.
Here's the ground truth video of Obama saying the same words.
Especially our friends who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. I visited with the families of many of the victims on Thursday, and one thing I told them is that they're not alone.
To demonstrate the power of the method, we apply the same input speech mapped to 4 different target videos. Note that all 4 are synthetic and have different lighting conditions.
Auto industry. To help families refinance their homes, to invest in things like high-tech manufacturing, clean energy, and the infrastructure that creates a good new job.
So I'm not going to play the whole video there, but like, what did you guys think of that? Like, what do you think of that when you see that? Because the hairs are standing up on my arm. It scares the crap out of me. And that's the truth. And seeing this video is actually what drove me to want to sort of express this idea of us getting more and more involved in ethics and sort of getting a grip on things. So going back to that phrase, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I think this is a really good example because I'm sure you can all see exactly how this can be misused. So the other thing we need to do is put that seat at the table to good use. So there's been a lot of press lately about how designers finally have a seat at the table. For the record, I believe that we've always had a seat at the table. And I think now that we are getting a lot more attention in doing that, maybe you still don't understand enough about what's going on. Well, there's a couple things you can do. You can participate in current training things that are happening out there. So there are like experiments and training exercises where certain machines, let's say, are trying to learn how to draw a cat. Well, you just go online and you draw a cat, and like, guess what? You can actually see how the machine begins to learn on what you're doing. So it's kind of fun to just get a feel for it. I think it takes away some of the mystery of machine learning, and it might be really interesting. 2, we need to be more communicative. So with all the stuff that happened with Facebook, I think they just got the 4th ding on privacy recently. It's an issue. I think exposing personal data is one thing and saying we have your personal data and this is what we're going to do. I'm going to push us a little bit harder and say, okay, what are you going to do with my personality data now? Because you are tracking all that information and you are getting all that information. And if you're proud of your products and you have nothing to hide, this shouldn't be such a big deal. If you are hiding it, it's an issue. And the third one, take care. So we need to build trust and continually build trust between us, other humans and machines and systems, and that's not going to stop. Because when we use something like Google Duplex, and they call, that was the Google Assistant that called the person to make the appointment, there was no transparency there, right? So they caught a little bit of flack because they didn't tell the woman on the phone, hi, I'm a Google Assistant and I'm calling for Lisa, right? So essentially we tricked the user, which is a terrible thing to do. Please don't do that. And we need to get past that point, and we need to be honest with what we're doing. And a simple, hi, I'm Google Assistant and I'm calling for so-and-so would eliminate so many things. And all of a sudden you move from being unethical to being ethical. So it's really not that difficult. And finally, for me personally, because I've asked a lot from you guys today, and I've given you all a lot of information, I'm going to do a little experiment as well. And so I was really moved by reading the UN's Declaration of Human Rights. And I thought, okay, how can I apply these things to digital? So I decided to take a stab at it. And I just wanted to share a couple of articles of that with you. They're very short, and eventually I will get to this and print it out. So the first one is, all human beings are equal in dignity, rights in physical and virtual worlds. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in the spirit of unity. That sounds pretty good, right? That doesn't seem like a big surprise. Article 2, everyone has the right to life, liberty, expression, security of person, and protection of their digital persona. And then also, that seems pretty good, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And finally, all humans are respected as individuals and should not be subjected to forcible governance by artificial systems. So understanding who we are and making sure that we remain in control. So those are just 3 that I'm working on. Clearly they're still in draft form, but I'm hard at work at them, so it will be continued, and we'll keep working on them, but that's it.